Uh-oh, he's coming in. He's coming in. Wow.
Predator Hunting Grounds is an asymmetrical shooter giving you the chance to play as the eponymous predator, hunting people down in the jungle and ripping out their spinal column. Or instead playing as a soldier, having you some fun, picking up the trail of the chopper and then bouncing back across the border before anyone knows you're there. Developed by Ilphonic, the same guys who made the Friday the 13th game, this again shows a bit of love and respect for the source material. In this case, it's the Predator series, one of the most awesome sci-fi franchises of all time. Well, the first 2 films anyway. I'd like to pretend that every movie that came out after that never existed. It's now available for Microsoft Windows and the PlayStation 4 exclusively on the Epic Games Store, which in 2020 is like putting a bullseye on your back. It isn't quite the love letter to the films as Friday the 13th was though. I mean, that game had different playable Jasons based off the specific films. Hunting Grounds instead kind of feels like a mishmash of everything just rolled into one. But like Friday the 13th though, if you don't have a couple of mates to play this with, this is going to vastly affect the overall experience, I think in a bad way. I know though, what a shock, a game designed around teamwork and communication isn't as fun by yourself. But it has to be said because there's still people out there who think that it's not a valid defense to say that a game designed solely around multiplayer and co-op is more fun with friends. Even with a couple of mates though, the whole game does come across as a bit of a missed opportunity, plagued with long matchmaking times, repetitive gameplay, and severely dampening the power fantasy element of playing as a predator. Still though, watching this video is going to turn you into a goddamn sexual Tyrannosaurus, just like me. So let's check it out.
Yeah. Stick around.
Sadly, this isn't set in the 80s and the weapons are just generic assault rifles and SMGs, but there is still a pretty good sense of faithfulness to some of the more important aspects of the series, like the Predator's appearance and abilities. The soundtrack in this is a combination of motifs and themes from the original film, along with modernizing it to make it fit in a more contemporary setting. The main menu music should sound pretty familiar. It's just a remix of the movie theme, but it's pretty awesome. It's also got those very familiar musical stings during some of the missions, and you'll hear those distinct sounds of the Predator's cloak, his vision mode changing, or a plasma cannon charging up. It's really part of the appeal of the whole thing, and I think fans of the series are going to love it. I think it also looks pretty good. You're moving through these downright gorgeous looking jungle settings with god rays piercing through this badass bush. Makes Cambodia look like Kansas.
Makes Cambodia look like Kansas.
Bit of a shame that it runs like arse though, like the frame rate can go from anywhere from 50 to 60 to down to like 20 or 30. And a choppy frame rate when you've got a predator coming at you with a goddamn elder blade isn't the kind of thing you want.
Yep, I'm down.
Right, so obviously keeping in line with other asymmetrical games like Dead by Daylight, you're essentially playing as either a killer or the survivor. As the killer, you're the predator, one of the few dudes or dudettes in the galaxy who can get away with rockin' dreadlocks. As the survivors, you're a human soldier forming a fire team of up to 4 people. Playing as the fire team, your mission is pretty much always the same. You choose to spawn on a random spot on the map, then you head off to your first objective. This depends on what mission you're playing, but it includes things like killing key targets, destroying server banks, or collecting intel. You're a bunch of no-names sent in to do some wet work, but there's something out there waiting for you in that jungle, and it ain't no man. And you lose it here, you're in a world of hurt.
Come out. Oh, I just made it.
Remember that scene from the first film when Dutch's crew took out that village and turned it into an explosion factory? Yeah, well that's pretty much what every mission is like in one way or another. And just like in the film, this attracts the attention of the Predator. For this side of things, you're just shooting the AI enemies, mostly guerrilla soldiers who are really kinda dumb. I mean, it's not AI, it's just A. And they're just gonna stand around completely clueless, even when you're gunning down their mates meters away from them. The Predator spawns at a random point of the map too, and the only way that he can locate the fire team is by the noise they make. So using silenced weapons and covering yourself in mud to throw off his heat vision and disabling alarms is kinda key. Instead of a first person perspective, it's now third person, and you're a lot more mobile, able to run across tree branches, leap great distances, and utilize all of his gadgets to hunt down and hopefully kill the other players. The dilemma here is that locating other players can be impossible some of the time because everyone is usually smart enough now to cover themselves in mud and use silenced weapons, at which point they're pretty much all but invisible. And right off the bat, I can think of at least a couple of solutions to this. First off, you should always be able to track footprints all of the time as the predator, regardless of whether or not someone is covered in mud. I mean, look, whether or not you're covered in mud, you're still gonna leave footprints. Same thing with brushing against trees and bush, there should always be a scratch mark left behind. And when someone completes an objective on the map, the predator should also get an indication, like in Dead by Daylight, how killers are notified of repaired generators. As it is, pretty much the only way of locating the fire team is by noise and hoping you're looking in the right direction to spot it, or else you're pretty much just hoping you get lucky and spawn near them, or else you're going to spend half the match just trying to find them. There's other numerous balancing issues too, like when healing up, soldiers have two options. They can pop a syringe that heals them in seconds, or they can drop down a medical kit that's got multiple uses. The predator has to run off, find a safe spot, and wait for like 30 seconds through this long-ass healing animation. Even if you manage to kill another player, they can simply run to a reinforcement spot and respawn them within like 20 seconds. You can kill 2 or 3 people and the fire team can just run away and respawn them anyway. So yeah, I guess this still is an asymmetrical game, but maybe they should have called it Hunting Predator Grounds instead. At least that way it matches up with all the balancing issues. Controlling the predator, it ain't all that good either. He moves a lot quicker in the trees, but trees aren't always connected in a way that makes map travel seamless. Running on the ground is an option, but you thud so loudly it's kind of like you're running around on wooden floorboards with concrete boots on. You've at least got all the tools and gadgets though. You've got the heat vision, the shoulder cannon, and the cloak, which makes you invisible if you're standing completely still. Unlockable weapons later on include the bow and the combi stick. The combi stick being completely broken to the point that you can wipe out pretty much an entire fire team in seconds. And yeah, that's real fun, isn't it? Abusing a single weapon to win matches. Not. Just another example of how inconsistent all of these elements are.
Oh, that's broken as fuck.
Playing as a soldier, it plays out like a pretty standard first-person shooter. The gunplay kind of reminds me of the recent Call of Duty games. You've got sprinting, fast ADS speed and reload time, hit markers, and then chunky, satisfying sound effects when you land headshots, as well as XP points popping up on the screen when you're making kills. I'm pretty pissed off though that there's no kind of vaulting or parkour system. I mean, a 2020 first-person shooter where you're playing as a special forces soldier and you can't even jump over a railing. Like, it boggles the mind. The whole loadout and weapon system is also very similar. You've got a primary and secondary weapon, along with perks and gadgets like flashbangs, healing syringes, and grenades. To unlock attachments for weapons, you first have to level the weapon up to unlock red dot sights, silencers, and extended mags. And the better weapons are locked behind the higher levels with made up names so Ilphonic doesn't get hit with another lawsuit. Overall, and I think surprisingly, the gunplay isn't that bad. It's fast, responsive, and there's great player feedback when you're hitting something. The real core of the game though is the fire team versus predator component. The enemy AI just serves as a bit of a distraction. The amount of damage they do is really just more of a nuisance than anything else, and it just kind of serves as fodder in between those times when a predator has finally found you. And this is where the game is going to make or break for certain people, and I say that because communication in this is just absolutely key. Seeing as you're moving through jungle environments with trees a couple of 100 meters high and concealing bush everywhere, the kind of bush they had back in the 80s, if you're not communicating the location of a predator, you're really just handicapping the 3 other players in your squad. On the PC, pinging something is done by pressing E by default, and if you can aim at the predator and tag him, or her, then everyone's going to be able to see its location for a couple of seconds. There's even this very PUBG-inspired looking compass, useful for giving other callouts on its position. And there is a noticeable difference in how matches play out when you're playing with people who use this feature and those who don't. Like when I was in a 2-man squad and we had 2 randoms with us, neither of those 2 other guys would bother pinging anything. And we'd see them randomly shooting up at the trees, but we had no idea where the hell the predator was because these 2 intelligent individuals didn't even bother to use one of the game's most crucial mechanics. Once the predator downs someone, which isn't all that hard, he's either got the option to execute them quickly or do a longer, more drawn-out execution. So a team that's sticking together is more likely to notice a downed player and drive away the predator. See what I'm saying here? One-on-one against a predator, you're probably going to get your ass kicked because the amount of gunfire this ugly motherfucker can take is pretty damn high.
You serious? Dude. god, if you saw how much I just shot this guy.
But if the whole fire team is shooting at this thing at once, well, it has no choice but to retreat, assuming your aim isn't complete dog shit. After dishing out enough damage, the Predator even leaves behind its glowing blood, which you can even follow to hunt it down before it's able to heal. Now when it comes to killing the Predator, it goes one of 3 ways. The first way is that you've downed it, and before you can kill it, it's set off the auto-destruct bomb, in which case it starts laughing maniacally, and you've got like 10 seconds to escape the massive blast radius.
I'm out. Oh, I just made it.
The other way is that it starts its auto-destruct, but you're able to hack into its computer and stop the countdown, but I've yet to see this done successfully. Finally, the third option is that you manage to kill it before it can start the self-destruct, at which point you've then got to defend its body until a bunch of CIA pencil pushers show up to extract it, giving you lots of bonus XP. Or of course the fourth option I guess is that it murders everyone on your fire team. I mean that's also pretty cool. Watching this awesome animation of your player getting their skull and spine ripped out, it's badass. But in the 15 hours I played, I can count the amount of times our whole team wiped on one hand. And one of those times is when we all got stuck in a small room and couldn't even get out. I'd say that out of all the matches I played online as a soldier, we won probably 95% of them. And this should honestly be the other way around. At one point during one match, we even ignored the objective entirely and we just went off to hunt down the Predator. Yeah, and we won, by the way.
I'm gonna have me some fun. I'm gonna have me some fun.
I feel like there's a real missed opportunity here too in how the players react to the Predator as well. Something like being able to use the environment more to your advantage, like putting skinned enemies near objectives to lower the other players' morale. This could then give them negative side effects like maybe increased weapon sway or reduced accuracy from fear. Like in the first film, how you had that scene where everyone was just shooting aimlessly at an empty forest, which completely demoralized them. The game kind of misses out on chances like that too, where you should be able to negatively affect the fire team in a psychological way. How about a mission where you have to escort a hostage, you know what I mean? One that's guaranteed to make noise and have a heat signature. I don't know, just something.
Please!
I think one of the issues is just how easily you can sway matches heavily in the fire team's favour, especially if you just follow some basic protocols. Putting silencers on your weapons, covering yourself in mud at all times, and also going for a stealthy route means that most people playing as the Predator won't be able to do jack shit. The other problem I think is that once you've played a few missions, you've pretty much seen all there is to see here. There's just not all that much variety with any of these, and it almost gets to the point where you're just going around in autopilot mode, interacting with whatever the mission is telling you to without even really concentrating on what you're doing. I don't want to single out a whole category of gamers too, but there is a noticeable, usually negative difference between how PC and PS4 gamers play this game, and that's all I'll say on the matter. The problem is that you kind of have to play this with crossplay on too, because otherwise you'll never even find a match. Even with crossplay on though, matchmaking times can be upwards of 5 or 10 minutes. If you're waiting to play as the Predator, well, just keep your day open and maybe go read a book or watch a movie while you're waiting. Finally, the real nail in the coffin is the price tag. The basic edition for the game comes in at about $60. The so-called deluxe edition comes in at around $100. Now, for a game with really only one mode and a handful of maps, that is not money well spent. If the game was half the price, like $30 or even $20, it would be easy to ignore a lot of the faults and just use it as a time sink to play with some mates and hunt down a Predator. But there's games out there you can get for similar prices that offer up way more content and value. The icing on this disappointing cake is also the expected bugs and the glitches too, ultimately making it really hard to recommend. To me, Predator Hunting Grounds is like mediocre pizza. I mean, you are eating it and it's not the best thing you've ever tasted, but you're still kinda like pizza. And it's got a few of your favourite toppings on it, so you stick with it until you've run out of slices. Pizza's great the first time you eat it, the next day it's maybe even better, but then after that you're better off throwing it away before you get sick. And that's kinda how I feel about Hunting Grounds. I don't think this is quite the train wreck that Friday the 13th was on launch, but it's definitely going to need some work on balancing out the Predator to make him a more viable opponent to play against or with. And if they don't sort out these matchmaking times, the game is just going to be dead within weeks. Yes, you can play this game and quote the film all the time and eventually get to the chopper, but in the state it's in, do you really want to?
Fuck yeah, bro. Dylan, you son of a bitch.